Welcome to the Culture Bar, an arts and culture podcast series brought to you by HarrisonParrott. In our Journey Journals mini-series, colleagues from across the HarrisonParrott Group tell you about their career journeys and share insights and advice about having a career in the music sector. Today, we are talking to Kaija Lappi. Hi Kaija, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Can you start by introducing yourself, please?
So I'm Kaija Lappi. I am half Finnish and half British. I was born in Germany, lived a few years in Finland, and did most of my schooling in the UK, hence the British accent. I am an oboist by training, and I've been with HarrisonParrott for about a month. So this is still a new environment for me, although not a new industry.
What is your current role in HarrisonParrott?
Yes, I'm an associate artist manager. So I look after a number of arts management clients, so conductors and instrumentalists. I look after their day-to-day. I do everything from helping them book flights and accommodation and visas, all that sort of day-to-day management stuff, down to making sure that they've got everything that they need in terms of rehearsal schedules, making sure that they've got somewhere comfortable to be for the day, something for them to eat, everything, making sure that their contracts are completely tip-top, making sure that they're left alone by the wrong types of fans and interact with the right types of fans, and just have a wonderful and easy career as it can be, is how I like to think about what I do here at HarrisonParrott.
You were saying that you were an oboist before. Did you plan on doing what you do now? How did that happen for you?
Yeah, so I went to music college. I started out at the Royal Northern College of Music, and I did a year there before realising that I needed to take some time and figure out what I wanted as my next step to be. So I sort of left my course there and got a job working, actually selling oboes and making oboes for a company in London, which I loved. It was very engaging. It was a way that brought me in touch with musicians in a way that I hadn't been before. I'm not from a musical family. I didn't grow up going to concerts and things. And so actually for me, this was the first time that I really came across a lot of professional musicians in that setting who were rushing in between concerts and things. And I loved being helpful. I loved meeting musicians, but also I loved being that kind of useful person. And also I really love industry stories and industry gossip, and you get really good industry gossip in those sorts of settings. So
Definitely.
for me, I then decided that I wanted to continue my studies and play at those amazing concert halls and all those sorts of things. So I went to Guildhall and I did my undergrad there. And I think I went into it with a different attitude. I realised that I wanted to carry on being useful, carry on being helpful, carry on hearing the stories and meeting the different musicians. And gigging life didn't really suit me, and it was never going to be what I wanted to do. So actually, in my last year, I got an internship at a different agency and sort of started discovering this kind of side of things, and really loved the kind of incredibly high level that you're working at, and how you can be working with really young sort of musicians and the kind of more older established, and just it brought me into a whole different understanding of the whole industry, which I really loved. So yeah, it's sort of, going back to your question, I think it was kind of quite clear for me from quite early on that I always wanted to be in the background. I wanted to be the person kind of sitting in the middle of everything, kind of knowing what was going on and being useful. I keep using that word, but that was always much more interesting to me than having to sit and learn the notes for the concert that evening. Yeah.
It's really interesting what you're saying, because usually when we think about the music industry from like the perspective of the audience, we don't think about the background job at first glance. So I think it's really interesting that you always kind of had that in mind and it's led you to this point.
Yes, I think I remember telling my mum that I wanted to go into the music industry, and I think she thought that it was either be a performer or a teacher. I don't think she realised that kind of the musicians don't just magically know when to turn up and where to go and how to get there. And so actually I think, this has been a learning curve for the whole family, but also for me as well. It's been really great. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. I'm wondering now, because you mentioned that you did not come from a family of music, and I'm wondering now, how did you get introduced to this world? How did it happen and when?
Yeah, you're going to get me on a music education soapbox now, but so I started playing the instrument when I was living in Finland, which has a much higher level of music education than especially the UK. And I was sort of encouraged to do it. My mum was my parents were very keen for me to do it as well. It was kind of a nice part of my education, but it was more easily accessible. It was cheaper. It was more readily available, and sort of that's what got me started then. So I did a few years of that in Finland and then came to the UK and started carrying on doing it in the UK. But I was really hooked. I've always loved orchestras. I love playing in orchestras, and I still do a little bit of that when I can. I think I really love that sort of sitting in the middle of everything, just hearing all the noise. Again, I feel like me sitting in the middle, like a sort of spider in a web, seems to be a real theme so far. But yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
There is this idea with your journey where you're stepping in both spheres.
Yeah, I like keeping track of everything, basically. I like being busy. I like being useful. I just find it all really interesting. Yeah.
I think it must be helpful for what you do when you have to put yourself in the shoes of the artist in a way.
And I always say to people who are starting that actually you don't need to know the industry. You don't need to know the repertoire. You don't need to know things like string strengths or additions and those sorts of things. But actually, just a love for it is a good place to start as any. And actually, it's going to help, but it's not vital. But do at least take the time to appreciate it and learn it and know what those things are. Like, take the time. Yeah.
And that's a really lovely message. I was wondering, because you speak several languages, is that helpful in your day-to-day job?
Yeah, definitely. So I speak some Finnish and I speak German pretty well just by basis of my background. And I find German to be, I don't know, I've been in lots of situations where German's been a more universal language in this industry than British has. I've definitely been in rooms where the assumption has been that everyone speaks German rather than everyone speaking English. And I looked after artists in the previous agency that I worked for who only communicated in German. So that was really incredibly useful. And it is sometimes, as with all these things, like just being able to communicate with the artists on their own terms, or picking up the phone to hotels and restaurants and things in places where people's English isn't as strong as that, is always a bonus. And I think, yeah, different countries, you always like to find your own compatriots and your own, people from your own country to communicate with, and you have the same sense of humours and all those sorts of things. So yeah, very helpful.
I feel like the cultural aspect is very important in this kind of jobs, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Having a real sense of, cultural sensitivity across the globe, because that's what we're working so globally, is really important. And having a company that represents that as well in your colleagues is invaluable.
Another question I have for you, we've talked about this a bit already, but I was wondering if you were trained for this job or if it is something that you are learning gradually.
Yeah, I think I started in this, and I think you need a few kind of key things. You need a really high attention to detail and things that are really difficult to train. Things like attention to detail, passion for what you're doing, confidence that you can make decisions on your own, sort of a certain speed of working, that kind of cultural sensitivity piece of actually being able to communicate with people from all walks of life and all ages and all those sorts of things is really hard to train. And you can certainly train things like, putting things in the calendar in the right way, and, which artists like which types of flights, and, who likes to rehearse early in the morning and who really doesn't like to rehearse early in the morning, and who wants to get home to their family as soon as possible. Those are all things that you can learn, and you can learn really easily. But actually, I think the key thing for being really an incredible person at this job is confidence, and that's something that kind of comes with time, and it's something that comes with support from your colleagues as well. And I think those two things together, support from colleagues, both your peers and also management as well, just to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, it kind of empowers you. That's the word. It's kind of about empowering yourself to make those decisions yourself, to use all the knowledge that you've got, that you've been taught, to be a really effective key part of the team. Is something that you can't be trained in so much, but you really just need to have as part of the culture of company, and you need to have as part of a culture in your team, and something that you need to kind of foster in yourself as well, to just keep pushing that.
And I'm curious, can you think of any moment where you you learned something from one of your peers, one of your colleagues in a situation like this?
Yeah, I think I remember overhearing a conversation once with someone who was sort of a peer to me on the phone, and I'm someone who's not necessarily particularly forthright. Maybe something about the Finn in me. I tend to be quite quiet and maybe a little bit more reserved. And she was very clearly laying down why she was right. And I think she was very clearly stating the decisions that she'd made. And she was speaking to an artist and she had suggestions for why things were the right thing to do, like why certain hotels were the right ones to go for, why he should accept this particular interview, why he should have this meeting. And it was all very sensible stuff. But actually, I'd never heard someone who was sort of in my situation really advocate for the decisions that they'd made and the recommendations that they were making. And I was like, actually, I could do that. I could be that person as well and just really say, okay, I understand what you're saying. However, this is all the information and this is why I'm recommending this. And even if the artist doesn't go for it, at least they have an increased sense of confidence that you know what you're talking about because you've given them everything. And I think that's such an incredible gift. And I still remember that conversation. So yeah.
It's also interesting that you're saying that you're a more reserved person, because some people might think that to do the job that you do, you might need to be very open and not shy. But really, I feel like it's all about balance. And even if you're in the background, you still have moments where you have to speak up.
Absolutely. And I think like loud or quiet, we've all got a lot of things in common. Like we've all got resilience. We've all got that kind of tenacious piece as well to just like carry on. And just that kind of love for the industry piece as well. I would hope, it's what kind of makes you carry on coming into work every day. And when times are tough and the visa hasn't quite come through on time and you're sort of stressing, you have to try and remember that you're going to a concert tonight, or that you kind of remember why you're doing what you're doing.
Is there anything that you do on the side, apart from music, that completes your experience in Harrison Parrott?
Going to be really boring and say probably not, actually. I think, honestly, the thing that I do that helps me be better at the job that I'm doing is to rest. That is an incredibly, incredibly boring answer, but I've done this. I've had a role like this since 2017, which is quite a long time actually to be sort of in that kind of what we would call in the industry servicing role. And I think that actually it's a role that has real highs and lows of energy and activity. Most of the time it is a real go, go, go job. And so the thing that I do is rest and make sure that I'm able to do that to the best of my abilities. Like I have the music piece in my life that I love, but I just try really hard to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And I read and I knit and I'm a real homebody. And it just means that I can be the best version of myself at work, basically, and means that I don't think of work as my whole life because I've got rest and relaxation and calm. Yeah.
Honestly, I don't see that as a boring answer. I'm very
Thank
happy
you.
that you said that. And I feel like more people may need to hear this. If you're not in the right mental state, it can affect other people, including the artists and the venues and the orchestras and all the rest. And also you mentioning reading and knitting, which I feel like is relevant because it's also something that's not just, about music. There's nothing wrong against listening to music outside of work, of course. But I feel like it can be inspiring to do something completely different.
Got to feed yourself first at the end of the day. You've got to feed you and your soul and yourself first. So yeah, exactly.
One last question, I think. If you had a piece of advice to give to someone who were willing to do what you do now, what would it be?
And be really boring and say what I just said, and that's rest. Take your time. Take your time. Rest. Don't try and be the person who answers first, because otherwise they'll always expect you to answer first. Don't be the person who is there at all hours because you feel that that's what you need to do. Rest. Look after yourself first. Your artists and your management will respect you and your boundaries if you are consistent with them, and make sure you take care of yourself, rest, and remember why you're doing it. Go to the concerts, go when the ticket offers come round, take them, go to the concerts. enjoy them, remember why you're doing it. I worked all through the pandemic in this industry, and it was really hard because I think a lot of us forgot why we were doing it because we stopped seeing what was happening on the stage anymore. And we stopped being able to go and actually see the product of our work, essentially. And it's actually made it even sweeter coming back and actually going, oh no, actually, this is why we're doing it again. So don't take that for granted. Don't take for granted the fact that you can actually go and hear the thing that you're doing, see the thing that you're doing, meet the people that you've been in contact with for so long, and take a bit of pride in the fact that you've got there.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, Kaija. And thank you everyone for listening to today's episode of Journey Journals. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to check our podcast on our website, and do not forget to follow us on our socials to be notified about our future releases.